All right then. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Construmat's Knowledge and Experience Series, Volume 2, Number 5. Today, we have the privilege of hosting an esteemed guest speaker, Mr. Kojo Duchum, a distinguished nuclear reactor core design engineer. Mr. Dutrum's extensive experience spans across multiple nuclear power generating plants in the US, and he is currently at the forefront of developing the next generation SMR advanced nuclear reactors for Holtec International as part of the US Department of Energy's Clean Technology Initiative. His notable accomplishments include significant contributions to the nuclear licensing content for the U.S. Regulatory Commission's Safety Analysis Report, NRC Standard Review Plan. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Duchum, who will lead discussions on effective engineering practices and disaster management. Mr. Duchum, good morning.
Well, thanks for the intro. Good morning to you and everybody present today.
Good morning.
Good morning. I guess I had some names to go with, so I don't know if I'm gonna do a little by the fireside kind of approach. But if anyone wants to give us any quick intro about themselves, who you are, at least just so I get to know you too.
Right.
Jacqueline, you can just give me a quick start, and then maybe Mami Adjoa.
Please come again.
Oh no, I was just trying to warm up the room by getting everybody involved. So I don't know if there are any series of protocol questions for me, but other than that, I just wanted to warm up the room a little bit.
Okay, that's fine.
So Jacqueline, do you wanna just maybe 20 seconds who you are? Would you do something like that?
Okay, so my name is Jacqueline Sampa. I'm an water sanitation and health engineer here at Construmat, and yeah, that's about it.
Okay, sounds good. If anyone wants to join Jacqueline, that's fine. Other than that, we can just proceed.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
I'm Goslav Adam Duncan.
What's your name again?
Goslav Duncan.
Okay.
I am a civil engineer, transportation and highway engineer with Construmat.
Oh, nice. How many years has it been?
5 years with Construmat.
Oh, congratulations. That's good. That's good. If anyone wants to join, I mean, again, I think the intro was already made. I don't want to repeat myself with the same things that was said about me. I just wanted to warm up the room because I want the conversation to be more of a two-way street, you know, coming from my side and your side. That way our focus is not just on what we're going to discuss today, but at least we can establish some kind of relationship and networking opportunity beyond meeting today. So that's my point. At least that's just so you understand where I'm coming from. I hope I made sense.
Progress. Yes, you're very clear. I think since I'll be assisting you today, it will only be good if I also introduce myself. I'm Mami Adjoa Buta. I've been with Construmat for about 2 years now, and my background is in administration and finance.
Great. That sounds good. So you are Mami Adjoa.
Yes, Mami Adjoa here.
So we had Mami Adjoa, and then I think Jacqueline went, and then I had Goslav.
Yes,
so
exactly.
This is me also trying to get to know you guys as we get through the presentation. Am I heard?
Yes, please. We can
Okay,
hear
it's
you.
very
Okay, so
clearly.
at this point, I think we can just proceed with the formality. I'll just let the presenter go ahead, just so we don't waste too much time, and then we can circle back the idea of warming up to each other as we go.
Would you want to share anything with us on the screen?
So today I basically would just want to start off with some presentation that I wanted to provide to you guys, but I think a copy was shared with Mr. Edward Melome. So I wouldn't want to start off with the presentation right away, but a few minutes before the presentation come off, I just wanted to say one or two things. First of all, the talk is for us to understand the overall impact that we have as engineers in our society, and not necessarily tagging names to what aspect of engineering we can bring our expertise to help. And the reason I'm saying this is, as you already mentioned, I come from a nuclear engineering background. However, the issue that drove the conversation, or that has been the topic for today's discussion predominantly, is with respect to the recent flooding incidents in Ghana. As most of you know, if not all of you, at least based on assumption, this is something that has been on the heart of many, or has either have some kind of annual repetition incidents coming from different scales. So with respect to flooding and then bringing someone from nuclear, the question is, so is a nuclear engineer going to provide a solution to a civil engineering problem? This is where we get to beg a question, and then begging the question also drives another chain of the conversation to the point that there are some best practices that are really independent of what field of study you have your expertise from. And this is where I bring in two perspectives. One, the fact that I was born and raised in Ghana, the fact that I grew up there and I have some cultural exposure to the system. And then two, the fact that even though I practice in a different field, so to speak, we still have the opportunity to bring some knowledge from an engineering practice point of view. And this is, in my opinion, a good way for us to kick off our presentation before we jump into, some scholarly, or what we call some scholarly presentation in terms of some theory, some research that someone has gone through. So let's understand the scope of it. What's the basis for today's meeting? Why have we come together? Is this something good for us? Is it something we can borrow from another department, another field? Even though not directly correlated, but also relevant. So I don't know if this is a good premise for our presentation today. If anyone has any feedback, I also entertain just cutting through with questions if there's anything that you don't understand that I present here. So on that note, I want to know if our premise for today's meeting is clear and clearly understood.
Yes, please, it's clearly understood. I think we should be able to proceed.
Okay, great. So in the context of what happened recently, I've had a very lengthy conversation with Mr. Melome, and we were looking at very significant key areas. And the significant key areas of our conversation today would be, how do we, as trained citizens of our country, as trained citizens of the world, so to speak, how do we come together to engineer a thinking process that has a very heavy focus on the solution rather than, playing the blame game? So the blame game can, to some effect, impact our ability to really figure out what could have been the best way to prevent this, or if we couldn't prevent it, the best way to mitigate the after effects. So I'm not here to look for who did what, who should have done what, and why the person didn't do what they were supposed to do. I'm here to say, even though I'm not a water and transportation expert, I carry with me a dose of experience from a nuclear industry, similar to how we also study other industries that we can apply to civil and water and hydro and city planning scope of engineering problems and solutions. So in that regard, I would maybe pick someone as Joseph. And Joseph, if you could just give me what your point of view is in terms of how this problem the problem that I just described, which is the flooding, what's your perception of it in terms of not playing blame games, but looking at it from like a problem solving perspective? What's your perception of that? Mr. Joseph, are you there? Do we have Joseph here today?
Yes, we do, but it's possible his internet connection may not be as stable
Okay.
as others. So yes,
Does
we may have to-
Yvonne want to go? Yvonne, do you want to chime in? Because I still want to maintain the fireside you know approach, just so it doesn't look like I'm doing the whole presentation all the time. I want to understand your perception. That way, when I dive in with my presentation on the screen, I would know what people think and how I can channel my thoughts. Yvonne, do you want to chime in? Maybe just 30 seconds, 1 minute. If not, Yvonne, if you can, that's fine. Does anyone else want to? I mean, Irene, Richard, I have your names here. I collected your names just so I can stay engaged with you guys. Irene and Richard, does anyone want to go? Or even Michael? If that's not the case, all right, go ahead. Daniel, do you want to
Okay,
go?
I'm Daniel Johnson.
Mhm.
Yes, please. I'm Daniel Johnson with Construmat. I'm a materials engineer on the OPRC Package 1 project in Yendi.
Okay.
I think it's possible to create reservoirs as part of a dam system to help prevent flooding.
Great.
So with the
great.
recent flooding issue, integrating the creation of reservoirs would also help.
Great. So Daniel's point of view is creating reservoir to help in case of flooding, and I'm pinning his recommendation or point of view to a future presentation of mine along the lines of preventive practices. So in the case of preventive practices, we in the nuclear industry, we have what we call, and I think it's not really a technical thing per se, but we call it the redundant safety measures. The redundant safety measures is something we can carry from the airline industry to auto manufacturing industry to nuclear industry to chemical industry to basically every kind of sector you can think of. The redundant safety measure specifically from nuclear is maybe 3 pieces to a pie. The first piece is I want to protect as much as possible the nuclear fuel pellet. And then I'm going to map what we do here with what we could do for this situation. If I want to protect the nuclear fuel pellet, I need to stack the fuel pellet into a rod made up of a material called zirconium alloy. And this cladding material just basically holds and retains radioactive fission products coming out of the nuclear fuel pellet. The second layer outside of this first redundant safety measure is to have some other containment that has all these instrumentations held in place. And this is the nuclear reactor pressure vessel. So the pressure vessel, very robustly made, is tested against all kind of material impacts, just so we don't escape in case the first boundary of protection is breached. Now, the very third one is the containment. The containment is designed such that even if the fastest plane would hit it, it will still stand. So how does nuclear apply here? This is basically what Daniel was saying. If we have a reservoir, we don't have a nuclear fuel pellet in this case. What we have is a flooding issue. It's a hydro capacity. It's a hydro potential matter. So if we have a reservoir from a preventive standpoint, this is not rocket science. This is stuff that you know, that I know, that I can tell you, that you can tell me. But as we come to have this conversation, it comes together in a spirit of giving ourselves timely reminders of the things that we already know, but maybe not necessarily to say we wouldn't practice, but at least just to emphasize by reminding ourselves. So by carrying a photocopy of the practice that we hold here, I would map a correlation to fixing this problem through a preventive practice. And then as we keep going on with this conversation, we're going to get to a point where it's not always all the time that the things you put in place to prevent something from happening can result in the desired outcome. Some things can go wayward. And if that happens, what do you do to mitigate? But I wanted to know, other than Daniel, does anyone have any preventive ideas that would have been a great tool? I have a PDF to share, but I just want to still warm up the room a little bit. And I'll try and share this. I think I have Beryl just said integrating forecasting into the, let me see. If you can't say anything by voice, you can just put it in a chat. So I believe Beryl said by integrating forecasting into the dam management. This is a very good piece. I have a software that I was going to share with you guys. Basically, this is a hydro simulation technique, but it stems, the suggestion for that stems from my nuclear examples I was giving you. So for every scenario, I'll give you the nuclear example, then map it to what we would have done in this case. In the nuclear spectrum, the examples that I gave you guys, where we have these 3 layers of protection, more or less, to prevent anything from happening. And trust me, look, these power plants have been running since 1960s, 70s, with pretty much almost no incidents at all, with 100 nuclear reactors here in the US. Now, how do we know that these preventive layers would really sustain the margins beyond which we don't expect them to go? We need simulation software. So when I go to work today I'm currently speaking with you guys 3 a.m. Eastern time, closer to Philadelphia. In 4 hours or 5 hours time, I'm also going to work. And when I go to work, typically Monday to Friday, all I'm doing is related to one of these preventive measures using software to simulate the nuclear performance, to say, hey, as much as we have all these tools in place, we need a software to simulate, to give us a predictive clue that, hey, the worst case scenario could possibly happen at this time by these circumstances through these metrics. And if we have these tools, I can tell my site vice president that, hey, listen, the fuel can burn a maximum of 54 gigawatt days in 3 cycles. Each cycle is 18 months. So 54 months, we need to take the fuel out, and it cannot go back into the nuclear reactor. This is all based on the power of simulation software. So I will circle that back to Beryl and say, hey, Beryl, what you said makes a lot more sense. And I believe Gabby Antoinette also added more to it, saying that effective and continuous engagement for the potential settlers to move on time. This is a post-incidence matter. which could also be a preventive matter as well. So on that note, if anyone wants to add something by voice, not through text, I just want to give you like 10 seconds to chime in your point of views. And then finally, I'll just share my PDF presentation, which I gave to Eddie Melome. And I hope he shares that with you after this presentation, but if not, I will be happy to share the source of the PDF too. If anyone wants to say something, just so please remember, this is a very engaging presentation. Gabby, did you want to say what you just said?
Hi, yes, please. So I think as part of the preventive measures, in my thinking, maybe if there are better planning of our settlement, so I would look more at the effects on settlements. So if there are better planning of our settlements, such that we don't have people building in the waterways, so that in case of maybe such emergencies or incidents, then there wouldn't be much effects on the society. So maybe instead of settlements, they could find other alternatives, maybe wetlands, at least get a way to design our rural and urban places very well to mitigate some of these issues that can be faced. Thank you.
Yeah, is that Gabby that just spoke?
Yes,
Is
please.
that, all right, Gabby Antoinette. So yeah, I have your name down here. I believe this is a very important point. And why is that important? Because now you have preventive measures in place where you are recommending as an engineer, as a consultant to say the government or to the authority operating the plant, the dam, that hey, in terms of foreseeing what could possibly happen, these are the preventive measures, and we spoke about them earlier. I believe Daniel even gave us a hint on that, and I tried to tie that very strongly with the 3 layers of safety or redundant safety measures that we have in place. Now, to have that in place, someone else also did mention they need to have simulation tools to be able to quantify these predictive practices. Then what if we are able to successfully implement all these recommended steps? What if beyond the unknowns, which in English terms, they call it beyond unforeseen circumstances. So beyond some of these circumstances, in the event something goes wrong, how do we even materialize our thinking process and quantify our predictive models into a post-event mitigation or a post-event solution? This is where I will try and tie in strongly the point from Antoinette, because as much as all the points said before could be good if implemented, now how do you settle these people when flooding actually occurs? So this is where settlement is an issue. We need to find out from 2 branches, and I recommended this through some of my points that I shared before. One, there's a compliance effort, basically recommended through authorities like the government or the company operating the power plant. And then there's a compliance effort, which is complemented by the public, the general population, the people within the environs of where this could potentially have a big impact if we had a simulation software to predict the areas where these impacts could hit the most. So when these 2 pieces come together to form a compliance effort, that is when we have the opportunity to mitigate the impact when something like this happens. Now, to circle back into what we were saying, if I pay someone to tell me what to do every day to stay healthy, you can list some of the things they're going to tell you. If anyone wants to go, I'm fine with that. But off the top of my head, what the person I'm paying to tell me what to do is going to tell me. One of them will be, make sure you drink a lot of water. Make sure you have enough sleep at the end of your workday. Make sure you take breaks. Make sure you eat healthy. Now, if you go through the list that we just went through, which one of them really is news to you or to me or to us? We all know this. So sometimes when we come together, the very recommendation we give to ourselves, for ourselves, to an agency, to a government institution, about what's the right thing to do, are the very same things we already know. But there are two things to it. One, when an ordinary statement comes from an extraordinary person, you assign importance to it. Or two, when an extraordinary statement comes from an ordinary person, you could also assign importance to it. And then maybe a hybrid combination of the two is if we stop seeing one as superior to the other or inferior to the other, and we consider both sides as giving what do you call it, the timely reminder, hey, don't forget to pick the children at after school at 4. Doesn't mean you were not going to pick the children. No, it's a timely reminder. So when we come together here in the United States, when we go to work, we have something called our daily or weekly alignment meetings. If you come to our meetings, Eddie Melome has been traveling. He's seen some of these things many, many times. In our meetings, we have this spirit of daily or weekly or monthly alignments. And in those meetings, I bet you're going to hear, oh my gosh, I took my dog to the vet, and the vet said the dog cannot go out for like a week. We are talking about engineering problem solving here, and the issue is a dog. Only for you to find out that in the trivialized conversation around a pet or another person going on vacation, we end up striking very good ideas to solve problems. So when we mention things that we should have done, should know, it doesn't come off as someone trying to be too knowing. It comes off as timely reminders. Oh, Charlie, I knew this before, but I just got hit twice, a third time, fourth time. So this was a very long chain off topic coming from what Gabby mentioned regarding settlement, but I was trying to chime in with you that there's also a need for timely reminders. Hey, do you know that every year around this time there's a high potential for flooding? You know that, oh, not saying that we already know this, but once it gets considered as a very important timely reminder, there's a different cultural approach to the same common denominator of information that can be used as a spirit of solution. And I believe Beryl just said exploring multiple channels for directing the spillage or the pathway is helpful. I totally agree with you on that. I don't really think you can mitigate flooding if you're not going to allow water to walk its path. And we know the power of water. Water does not negotiate when it travels. Water will always find its own level. And we need to give its way as a way of respecting nature's precedence over how we can force it to be. Now, I believe we've warmed up the room within like 25, 30 minutes, in my opinion. I'm going to circle back to the moderators to see if they have any interim questions on how things can move around smoothly. Other than that, I'll just move on to share a PDF presentation with you guys. If the mods are there, just let me know. Should there be any interim questions? Does anybody have any questions for me so far, either specific to nuclear, specific to my background, specific to the implementation of best practices for effective disaster management. Does anybody have any questions for me so far? Any questions from who do I have on the list here? And then Jacqueline Kasai. Jacqueline, have you spoken today?
Hello, could you? My
Yeah,
name is
Kwame. Kwame, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So, the conversation is interesting. For me, in our context, I was waiting for you to finish your slides, then I'll pose this question.
Go ahead. It doesn't matter.
It all comes back to the Benjamins, you know. How do we finance all of this? I mean, we have great ideas and all of that. What is the plan towards that? Because there's so much that can be done. The plans and the brainstorming and everything. How do we put it on the ground? Because all that we're talking about, it comes back to the Benjamins. Thanks.
You mean it comes back to money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. So it's funny you say that, because in the stream of things, in regardless of what field you are trying to discuss solutions, you would always have to find a way of, implementing or action, like putting them into action items. So how are we going to make these actionable items? The execution of some of these things will rely partly on discipline, would also rely partly, and as part of my presentation, one of the ways to execute these ideas, in addition to what Kwame brought up, which is money, is discipline. Because if I know what is right, if I know what has to be done, and if I can do it, but I will not do it, the will not do it part sets up a Berlin Wall between all the good things and all the ability to accomplish. So it's not always money, to be very honest with you. Within the context of Volta River Authority existing, within the context of a sovereign country or nation called Ghana existing, within the context of us having engineers who are operating these things, I don't necessarily think money could 100% be the problem, but of course could be a fraction of it. The other part is, if we have a plan, a program in place for an opportunity to address this issue that seems to carry maybe yearly or maybe annual or biannual recurrence or occurrence, I think it is very important from a political standpoint, which may also drive us a little bit backwards to see how we can tap into the blame game theory. How do we avoid this as a blame game theory and make it as a neutral entity for funding, so that if a study has to be made, if a software has to be purchased for simulation, if infrastructure has to be built, this is where we can circle back and find a common ground solution. It is not an entity we are trying to bring into existence. This thing has been there, giving us electricity, selling power to other countries if we have to, or other regions and things like that. So it's not something that is not economically viable for us to be able to squeeze money out of to fund the very good things that need to sustain the disaster management component of it. This is my answer to you, Kwame. I don't know if it does make sense. I believe there's supposed to be some internal budgetary skill sets from management, accounting, and all of that, because it's not always engineering that solves all problems. At the end of the day, if I design something that looks pretty nice, but then there could be the potential $1 million cost to it, who is going to execute that? Then my design is just a beautiful software sitting on a computer. So Kwame, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, could you, I've always been grappling with this because there are a lot of engineering solutions that I know on the drawing board. But, well, I would agree with you. Discipline is one that is, very important. That the actors would be disciplined enough that this is the plan and this is how we need to go about it. And at the end of the day, we just need to be disciplined to use the money for what it's intended. If the plan is good and we are not disciplined about it, yeah, I think it wouldn't come to anything. So I agree with you.
Yeah, and again, I'm not a custodian of all solutions. It's that's why we are here for a conversation. That's why we are here for a discussion. That's why I like to engage with different opinions. Because if we have a budget of say $500,000 for a project, and lack of discipline alone cost us the ability to judiciously use that $500,000 to execute implemented solutions or recommended solutions, then we come down to needing more than we're supposed to. So the desire to do it is a very critical part. The willingness to follow through is a very critical part. The discipline to consistently make this a habit, even from what do you call it, maintenance culture standpoint, all of those things are huge money saving opportunities for us. I believe Jay's hand is up. Jacqueline, if your hand is up, kindly go ahead, Jacqueline.
Okay, so just to add to it, sometimes we are also always looking at the novel, high-class, expensive solutions. Maybe sometimes very low-cost solution or simple engineering solution can solve the problem. For example, there were some areas along the basin that should have flooded, but then due to creation of wetlands, they were safe.
Great.
So maybe we should also look at the simple engineering solutions that we can put in, and I'm sure we should be able to afford that.
That sounds good. I think you hit a chord with me on the elegance of solution buried in simplicity. Sometimes I have always held this opinion, and it's very agnostic of fields of study or anything. My opinion is the more simplistic or basic you gravitate to, the more advanced you actually become. So usually in graduate school, for example, graduate engineering coursework, you name it, almost all the courses that have the title advanced are easier in my context of opinions than courses that start with fundamentals of, introduction to, foundations of. So you see the building blocks of complex solutions are always on the simple principles. And the simplicity could also come with what Jacqueline just mentioned. Finding a solution that works may not necessarily have to do with money. If 400 people have to move out of this area by X hours or within Y hours to allow the water to move freely, that's an elegant solution that doesn't really cost so much on the budget. So I totally agree with you, Jacqueline. I don't know if anyone wants to chime in. If the conversation has warmed up enough to trigger your thought processes, this is a time for you to just chime in. You may not necessarily have to raise your hand to seek permission to express yourself. So take advantage of all of that. But Jacqueline, thanks for your point of view.
I think at this point it might be good to jump into the presentation now.
Great.
So we
all right, so let's just go
result on
ahead
too
and
much.
the presentation is not going to take much.
Sure,
I
that's
just wanted
fine.
us to just chat around the whole thing a bit, because usually when you start a presentation, it's just like boom, PowerPoint slide, PDF slide. Then you kind of get a little too scholarly. And you know, I used to teach here quite a bit, and sometimes when I go to class, they're like, is he going to teach or he's just going to talk? So I have times where they give me students, they assign me students for like say 6 months and maybe half a year, whatever, you name it. And then I take like a whole week just to get to know them. And by getting to know them, I was able to speed up twice as fast as someone who just came, took their dry erase marker and then spilled equations on a board, making it look so complex and fancy and things like that. Again,
Right.
it comes back to my theory. the most advanced things in life are very simplistic. Get down to the basics, warm up with people, because it's always about people. But anyway, on that note, I think I cannot share my screen while the
Okay,
participant is sharing. So you can,
right, so you can go ahead.
yeah, I'm going to see how I can get this to show up. And then, okay, so I have the desktop, believe system. If not, I can just share my PDF file with you guys and you can, okay, Zoom. Yeah, it's asking me to. So based on my settings, it would be best if I can just share the PDF with someone and then can I just share my PDF with you and then you present it to me for me? Thank you. If not, I would have to quit and then come back in.
You should be able to share it via email. I can quickly work on that from my end.
All right, sounds good. Let me do that right away. But before, as we share the PDF, does anybody have anything to say in the interim? Go ahead if anyone has any thoughts at all.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation, our discussion so far. But on the issue of telling the people or forecasting the height of water or flooding this and all that, I think we can make the culture very firm by simulating to show the people, not just the engineers, simulating to see when water will rise and all that, the timings and all that, but if we can also simulate to the community to see the impact of flooding or a spillage, a potential spillage that will come in the future, they can appreciate the fact very much than just the engineering point of view. You have simulated on our machines and we see that and all that and just only tell them. But if you can simulate for them to see the impact that it will bring on them, it will help in the resettlement plan or all those things. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. So from a nuclear standpoint, when we go through simulations, it's actually like a three-piece to a pot or something like that. The first is we, the entity, as say a utility or a company or an engineering firm. And then two is the regulatory body, which is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is the NRC, basically oversees, for example, hey, what simulation did you go through and how does that equate to safety in terms of prevention and maybe post-event mitigation? Then the third piece to the part is the public domain, who that impacts basically has to have access through public records. They should be able to have access to it, and then some, educational programs presented to them as well. So the process is not like one person knows it all, sort of holds the solution as an expert opinion, and then maybe trying to sell it as a consultant kind of gig. Of course, sometimes there's a recipe to the trade that you don't want to give out too much, but at least for the benefit of society, there's always that practice where we publish within our industry, within our company, we present to the regulatory body, and then the regulatory body also has a public domain where everybody can have access to. So I believe in the line of that, who just made the comment? Is that Isaac? Isaac Aqua. Correct.
Emmanuel, please.
Was that Emmanuel?
Yes, please, Emmanuel.
Okay. All right, cool. So that was a good point. But anyway, my presentation is what you see on the screen. I just wanted the presentation to be strictly void of nuclear stuff. There's some cool stuff I wanted to show you about nuclear if you want, but that's going to be at the tail end if we are able to successfully exhaust our conversation today. But for now, this is the FEMA risk measures for dams. And I picked this just so I can deviate from, choosing a nuclear material, which will get me too excited talking about what I do every day and how cool what I think we do is and stuff like that. So at least just so we can stay closer to relevance. In the FEMA scheme of things, we are not really talking any different from the very same things that all of us here agree to or have contributed in part. The FEMA is just the United States version of saying, hey, these are fact sheets for reducing risk with respect to the dams that we operate here. And I want to put this in perspective a little bit. In the United States here, companies do have mixed portfolio, and you get that with other countries too. The mixed portfolio is we want to supply electricity to the general population, but based on the region where we operate, maybe our predominant source of electricity may come from fossil. Maybe our predominant source of electricity may come from solar. For example, if you operate in Arizona belt, California, Arizona, Texas belt, you can have like solar opportunities. If you operate more towards the flatlands area, like Iowa, Indiana, things like that, you may have a lot of opportunity leveraging your power plant production, electricity production through wind. And then, like myself, if you operate in any state, especially around the water regions like the East Coast, Southern states, the West Coast, and things like that, then you can have a lot of leverage with nuclear reactors adding to the electricity. So this is where you have the diverse portfolio of electricity production. It's very hard for you to get like one power company that owns just a hydro company and that's it, or one power company that has just nuclear and that's it. So we have these diverse portfolio, and one of the portfolio diverse contributors is hydroelectric generation. So we don't necessarily have the case in Ghana where significantly maybe 80 to 90%, if I'm not quoted wrong, of our electricity comes from hydro. Here, 20% of all 50 states take their energy from nuclear. And then some will take, maybe hydro is about 10 or 20% at the very most. But in the practice of any of these energy production, there are some risks involved. There are risks involved in operating nuclear. There are risks involved in operating coal-fired power plants. There are risks involved in operating gas-fired power plants. And this, what you see, is what they've captured specifically, even though other industries can learn. These are the risk summary in terms of the measures that have been studied for decades in reducing the impact of aftermath effects, preventive measures to not even get there in the first place. And one of what you see is just what Emmanuel was just saying: public outreach. Get the people involved. And that ties back to a very trivial point we mentioned earlier when we were trading off ideas, where I said the compliance effort, in my opinion, the compliance effort is a two-way street. The public and the institutions. The institution could be the company running the power plant, could be the government who serves as a regulatory body for the power plant's operation. So all of those two come together, or those pieces come together as a way of reaching out to the public for very, for collaborative compliance. And what you see is the public outreach is just three pieces to a part that you see right there on the bottom right. It's a pre-event, a post-event, and then a mid-event response. These are solutions, in my honest opinion, blueprinted that could be used universally. These are not United States solutions. These are like common sense solutions that anyone operating a hydroelectric power plant can implement. If I go in to this page to apply it to nuclear, does it come any different? No. There's a public outreach in nuclear too. There's a public outreach in almost several industries when it comes to risk reduction measures. But this is just, applicable to dams. Can the admin help me move to the next page, please? But before we do, any questions on this page before we go to the next page? Any question on the page we just presented before for the public outreach? The breakdown of the next page is not too different. We've really worked our appetite in terms of these salient points. Now you have a pre-event planning. The pre-event planning, I share that initially with a preventive culture. Preventive culture, maintenance culture, these are all pre-event planning. However, we need to be able to have the opportunity to perform mitigations using the softwares that we mentioned through simulation, conducting public outreach, having an opportunity to assess risk and quantifying these risks, where if I'm to, again, deviate, my practical experience in this perspective is when I worked with the PRA department. PRA stands for Probabilistic Risk Assessment. And the PRA is not really just what you would see in, say, a typical nuclear system. You can have a probabilistic risk assessment team in a bank with an investment company. They look at all of these things. They look at the impact and they look at the probability of it occurring. They look at what are the chances this occur. And then if it does occur, what will be the impact? And that's how you get the risk out of that. So in terms of preventive planning, we've exhausted all of that. I would just assign the assessment of risk more to simulation, in my opinion. Just doing risk assessment, planning actions based on quantitative measure of how we think these things will be when they happen. And in my honest opinion, before anything happens at all, we have too many tools to know this. We have so much knowledge to know it. We just have to stay trusted among our circles, that whenever there is a hint of what is good to be done, we do not take it as being too known, but we take it in the spirit of timely reminders, as we mentioned before. I believe we can go on to the next page. Admin, please. All right, so when you look at the type of consequence assessment and planning, is very detailed here in the table for us. All we have here is just like the consequence and then the action. So in terms of consequence and actions, you essentially have, these are not all, but the key consequences that have been identified in mitigating dam related incidences. So we have preparedness, we have operational consequence, we have security consequences, and then we have zoning consequences, as well as emergency operation consequences. And without reading them in detail, all we have to know is that if we are not prepared, there's a consequence to that. If we are deficient in our operations, there's a consequence to that. That is where you can relate it to maybe a mechanical fault, an electrical issue. These are all operational that can cost us. So the whole idea of us knowing what to do, going through the points where we can be prepared, be operationally efficient, we can put in mitigation cultural practices, provide and develop security plans, both physical and cyber. I mean, you'd be surprised how much technology can even help. One thing we never mentioned that I was going to bring up is how we can even use drones and then feed these drones with cameras to just capture wide areas from the dam areas, within the neighborhood of the dam areas, and how we can just be able to see how far, in connection with simulation software, how far this water can go. Because when this happened in Ghana, the water got to places that people never thought it would get to. And these are some of the things we can embed in the recommended solution. And I believe, in my honest opinion, we have more than it takes to solve it. At least for today, it's just an hour conversation. It doesn't exhaust all the passwords that we need to unlock to get this done. But just having a conversation started like this, in my opinion, is a good way for us to get together. Maybe a few more times and then put our points together. That way, it's not just theory coming off the top of our heads. Admin, is this all the pages we have? Do we have one more? Yeah, so the business and property owners. Who are the business and property owners? This could be the Volta River Authority in this case. This could be the government of Ghana if the government of Ghana had not privatized that to another company to operate. Sometimes here you have power plants that are administered by the state, by the municipal, by the zip code, by the county, and things like that. So the business and property owners essentially have the same responsibility that we mentioned earlier, where, hey, if there's a compliance effort, it is not just the responsibility of those at the top. If there's a compliance effort, we are not shoving it down the throats of those who we think are subordinates, which is the general population. There is a mutual effort for us to come together. I believe this is all the presentation I have that captures in very detailed documentation all the different random solution ideas that I presented from the perspective of working in the nuclear industry. And all I was trying to do was to do my best merging my background in nuclear with a mirror image of applicability to hydro, and then blending my background growing up, in Ghana and things like that. But on that note, I think this is going to be the PowerPoint I can share with you if you guys can have a copy from the admins, and then hopefully that can be the source of more documented version of some of the thought processes that we're given randomly. And I don't know, my idea is that someone of you, or maybe someone not here today, myself, we can come together one day and then whip up some ideas and present it to people in higher authorities. Because other than that, what is the point in the solutions that we are discussing today? That's some of the concerns I had growing up. I watched talking points. I watched the solution of my country being discussed so eloquently on very key national television programs. And then I wondered, were these solutions even ever collected and presented it to people in power, the right persons? And that's what I'm expecting for us to do if we can collaborate and come together. So I think on that note, I have 2 minutes to the top of the hour, so I'll be very respectful to the admins for the presentation. That way we stay right within the bounds of time.
Right, I think you can allow a question or two whilst we wrap up this session, given the time.
Yeah, so feel free to ask anything. You can branch off to nuclear, you can branch off into the dam issue, the issue that just recently happened. It could also be, Isaac, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Yes, please. I understand the flooding has become the talk of the day because of its impact it has currently. But I wanted to hear your opinion on I think 1 month ago in September, we also heard of explosion at Shama. Shama. Yes, in the Western region. So if you can give us a view, what might have caused, or I'm sure you have a bit of information than we do. So if you can tell us what might have caused, because we also have.
Was this a gas power plant?
No, it was a quarry. Yes, so we are also working within quarries and all that. If there are measures we are supposed to take.
I would be very dishonest if I said I followed that story. I did not, but I believe that one thing I've seen here is when we go to work, sometimes our supervisors will tell us, hey, is there anything we can learn from the auto industry? Is there anything we can learn from Boeing operating in Charleston, South Carolina, within the aerospace industry? And then some of them can just show up within like any 5 minutes or an hour or whatever the duration is and say, hey, this is the trend of what's going on. But even if it may not directly apply to you today, it could be later or indirectly. So we anticipate things happening and then collect feedback from others. In a very winding, indirect way to answer your question, I would say I didn't really follow that, but I also believe that some of those things would have been caught up if there was a preventive practice culture. Because some of these operations are triggered by human actions, such that nature would not have erupted like that if we didn't trigger one or two things. So it always falls within the best practices of preventive softwares used to quantify impacts and when those impacts happen. So I guess I would have said no within 1 second, but just to add meat to the no, that I would have said, this is what I can provide to you. Yeah. So
Okay, thank you very much. Right, so I think we'll take one last question and then we wrap up the session. Kwame Okonkwo, you can go ahead.
Wasn't it Kwame who just asked a question?
No, that was Emmanuel Latia.
Emmanuel, okay.
Sorry, could you? Well, I think mine is a compliment. I like your style of presentation. I think you've done a good job. You ended up on a note. You still captured the whole presentation. In my opinion, I think it's a good one. I have learned something today. Thanks.
Well, thanks for the feedback, and I look forward to giving my time for us to meet in the future when we can, as long as it's not going to cost me to wake up at 3 a.m. Eastern time. Yeah, but for everyone here, I also wanted to say I learned much from you, because I think we blended the topics pretty well by just, feeling the by the fireside kind of approach, where it's not one person who knows it all that's going to spill out 1 hour piece of information. Let's come together, but you can network with me on LinkedIn, anywhere, and then ideas may come today, next week, next year, you never know. And on that note, I also feel very honored that you even invited me. It's like, who am I for me to even give a talk?
All right, Mr. Kojo Edutrim, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I think the first thing I'll say is thank you for waking up at 3 a.m. to have this discussion with us. It's been a pleasure listening to you and engaging with you this morning. We've learned a bit about the roles we can all play. And then also one thing that has struck me the most is the fact that even the simple and the little things matter as well when it comes to preventing disasters. Thank you very much. I'm sure my colleagues have also benefited from this so much. And I think I'll continue from where Mr. Opong left off. Yes, I've really enjoyed this style of presentation. It's been very engaging, and I hope we'll be able to have you on again soon. So thank you very, very much.
Sure. Right. I also do help people who want to seek opportunities. My help goes far and beyond, but we can reserve that for another conversation another day.
Right, that's fine. So, okay, so do enjoy the rest of your day, and I wish the same to the rest of the participants who have joined this morning.
All right, sounds good. So on that note, I'm just going to log off. And again, thank you for having me. If Eddie Melome is there, salutes, and we talk more.
I'm here listening to you. You did great. Thank you so much. All right, thank you so much. All right, I'll link up shortly.
All right, then let me see how to log out of this. All right, bye. All right, bye, guys.
Okay.